Hey guys, and thanks for joining. Today I'm going to go over a few different ways that you can adopt devices into unifi. I'm not going to go over how to set up a cloud key or how to adopt devices when they're on the same network because they automatically show up in unifi. I'm going to go through how to set the inform URL from the command line of a unifi device, and then I'm going to go through how to make changes to your DNS so that devices automatically show up in your unifi controller with hands-off interaction, same way as if your controller was on the same subnet. And then I'm going to also go through how to briefly use the discovery utility, although I try to stay away from that personally. Anyways, let's dive in. Alrighty guys, let's take a look at some of the ways that we can go ahead and adopt equipment. Right now, the only thing that we see in here is an access point that is online at the client site. But let's first take a look at finding the devices on the network. So I want to go ahead and minimize this browser. Ubiquiti made an app called the Ubuntu Discovery. Quick tip for those of you using Mac: if you download something and you get this error because of your security preferences, you don't have to go all the way into your system preferences pane and under security. If you just hold the control key, click, and then click on open, you'll then get the option to click on open from here, overriding that security display. So right now it's scanning the network that those switches are plugged into, and it doesn't find anything. So this is one of the problems with the Ubiquiti Discovery utility, is that sometimes it just won't pick them up. So they also made one for Chrome. Let me see if I can open that one. Here we are. So this is the Chrome app with Ubiquiti. So this is the Chrome app with Ubiquiti. It has two different searching methods. It'll find either Ubiquiti devices or unifi devices. If you have unifi devices, you have to click on the unifi family button over here. But again, it's not finding it on my network. This is not the first time that this has happened. They're definitely there, because if I open up LANscan and I run the scan, there they are, all 6 of them. So this kind of brings me into how to adopt them from a command line. So let me go ahead and pull that to the side, and let's go ahead and open up a terminal window. So we can do this over SSH. From Mac, I use the built-in terminal. There's other applications that you can use as well. On Windows, you can use PuTTY. So the first switch that I want to go ahead and adopt is this one right here. So 10.0.40.11. So SSH UBNT, because that's the username, at 10.0.40.11. We'll hit OK. Okay, so I put a cheat into my SSH config. This line is usually a question that you'll get asked: do you want to add this key or do you trust this host? And so I got sick of answering that all of the time and having conflicts because I'm SSHing in devices with the same IP address. So I added a little bit of code into my SSH config that would just overwrite all hosts every time I SSH into them, because I'm aware of where I'm SSHing into, and if I do need to check the integrity of a host, I can add a couple of options into my SSH login. Anyways, the password is also UBNT. That's the default username and password for unifi devices. As soon as you adopt a device to a controller, that password is changed by the site's username and password. I'll show you how to get to that from there. So if we type in info, we get the current information about the device, including the model, version, IP address, and uptime, and also what its current controller status is. So right now it's unable to resolve. By default, it looks for just unifi. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a moment, but we're going to go through and actually give it a inform URL manually. If we type in help, we will get that inform URL right over here. So we just follow this. So we'll do set-inform HTTP, it's important that you don't put HTTPS, even though your unifi website is on HTTPS. You can use a URL if you'd like, if you have that set up, port 8080/inform, and hit the enter key. So an adoption request has been sent to your controller. So from here, we need to use the controller to complete the adoption request. What did I do wrong? So after a few minutes of debugging, I typed info again, which will tell us the status of our inform, and it turns out that the version of this switch, the firmware, is too old and incompatible with the version of the controller that I have. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the firmware. If we type in help, we'll get the upgrade syntax of how to do this from the command line. I simply went to the Ubiquiti website and grabbed the URL for the bin file. So if I type in upgrade and just paste in that bin file, it'll download the firmware and go through the upgrade process automatically. Now, I might have to do this for my other switches as well, depending on how old their versions are as well. So let's go ahead and wait for that to get done. Awesome. So now that the firmware is upgraded on all of our switches, we can go ahead and run the set inform command. There we go. So we're no longer getting a decryption error, which also means that, look at that, our switch is now showing up in unifi for adoption. This part you guys should already know. Click adopt and allow the switch to adopt into your unifi controller. There's a caveat here. For a while, when you're doing manual adoptions or your controller is not on the same subnet, once your switch shows up in unifi and you click adopt, you'll have to go back to the command line and do the set inform command again. I'm not sure why this is, but if we let this sit here, it will simply fail. So the controller is trying to adopt, but the switch still thinks it's not adopted yet. But if we run the set inform command again, that will quickly change, depending on the refresh of your controller window. There we go. So now we're starting to provision, and if we run the info command again, we now get told that we are connected. If you notice the difference between the inform URL here and here, that's a setting in the controller. The controller has told this switch where to go for informing, and so I have set my controller to have all my devices go directly to the public IP address where my controller is, instead of constantly making DNS queries against the URL. Okay. So the new switch has now been adopted successfully. And we can see that it's online. That's actually a really interesting error. No sensor for temperature. I haven't seen that one before. I'll have to see if that's actually right. We were talking about passwords before. If we simply use the UBNT password, it no longer works. To get to your site's settings, go into settings, then into network settings. We'll go into device authorization, and from here you can see the SSH username. and you can click on the show for the SSH password. You can also add an SSH key here. I would really recommend doing that. I haven't done this yet because this is a new site. Also, keep in mind SSH security. If you're running a controller for multiple people, please make sure to use different SSH keys for each site and location. If a customer leaves, you don't want to be giving them your SSH key. That goes to everyone else. Okay, so that's the command line way to adopt it. Let's talk about how we can adopt devices simply by plugging them into the network without the controller on the same subnet. Alright, this is my first voiceover, so let's see how badly I fail at this. I'm going to give this one shot. So what I'm doing here is I'm pinging my URL. I need to get the IP address that I'm going to work with, so I'm going to copy that. We're going to go make changes to the DHCP settings. What we need to do is set a domain name that gets handed out with the DHCP lease, because the unifi devices are simply pinging unifi. But when you're doing a DNS resolution, you actually have to resolve a URL. So I made up a domain name. We can absolutely do that here because we're not doing this as a public, we're doing this locally on our network. I'm then going into my DNS server and adding a specific host. Again, this is only resolvable internally. So we're going to make the host unifi. It has to be that way. Make sure the domain is the same as what you just set in DHCP, and set the IP address to your unifi instance. Go ahead and save and make sure you click on apply changes. I'm then going to go check on the firewall rules, make sure that DNS can actually query against my firewall, which I'm realizing here that it can't. This firewall rule that you're looking at only allows traffic to go to the internet, but not against the firewall. So UDP for DNS, we're going to say, hey, the red net is the source and the red address of the firewall is the destination, and we're going to choose DNS only, and please add a proper description just like I'm doing here as well. Again, make sure you click apply changes. From here, we're going to go back into my DHCP server, and we have to change, yep, yeah, okay, I did it right. We have to change the DNS address that's being handed out on DHCP so that devices know that they have to resolve against the firewall, which is where we just made all of our changes. All right, I'm logging into the switch again. The easiest way to do this is just to reboot the device, which I'm going to do, which we did. I'm just going to go ahead and do that for all of them apparently. I don't quite remember everything that I did in this video. Like I said, I'm just going to do this voiceover in one shot and we'll see how well it goes. Alright, now that all the switches have been rebooted, I'm going to log into unifi so we can go over to the devices tab and see if the devices have shown up. They haven't yet, that's because they're probably still rebooting, so let's give it another moment. And there they are. Using the DNS method, they will show up in your controller automatically. Try it again, there we go. Password UBNT still, and if we do info, we'll see that our status is now in not adopted, but if we simply ping unifi, because of all the changes we made, the switch is now able to resolve to the IP address of our controller, and the other switches are starting to boot up as well and showing up in unifi. So that's how you do DNS. The one thing I want to add is, unlike the command line method or the discovery method, you don't have to resend the command to the switches because they already know where that host controller is. They come default looking for unifi, they're constantly talking to unifi. And I'm just typing in the info command to get a status update from that switch. It's starting to hesitate because it's processing, and eventually we see that it is connected, again, without intervention to the switch. All we did was reboot it, and we did all of our adoptions from unifi. Okay, I was able to finally get the discovery to work. on my Windows computer just simply by plugging directly into the switch with all of the Ubiquity switches. Don't forget you have to click on the Unify Family button in the top right hand corner, and once it's done discovering your switches you can click on Action and change your Inform URL, same as we've done in the command line. Once you've changed your URL, you can leave the username and password the same. Click on Execute. It'll take a moment, and you should now be able to see your switch in your Unify controller. Don't forget that you will have to come back here, click on Action again once you've clicked on Adopt to make sure that the provisioning completes successfully. If we go into our controller and take a look, let's look for the switch ending in MAC address B468, and there it is. Yep, and we're just completing the process by going through, clicking Action, and setting Adopt again. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining me again. Hope this was really informative. Please let me know what you think. I'm trying to improve my editing. I have new cameras coming in, so you'll be able to hear me and see me better. I'm using just the built-in camera on my MacBook right now. But if you have any questions or if I missed anything, I try to be as thorough as I can and give hints and tips throughout. Let me know in the comments. Happy to make a new video or work with you directly if you have any questions, as long as they're reasonable, of course. Anyways, hope you guys have a great evening, and I'll catch you later.